Okay, welcome everyone for today's Dao De Jing reading and the translation. And we will, last week or 2 weeks ago, we finished chapter 25. Today we will go from chapter 26, 27, and probably 28. And the format, everyone, if you have your own translation, you are welcome to read your translation. And after that, Amang and I will read or show our work on the translation. And then we will have about 20 minutes discussion. Please focus on the chapter we just worked on, and then we can move on. So let's start from chapter 26. Is anyone want to read your version of translation? I know Kwang, you would like to read. Yeah, please.
And yes, anyone else, either a raised hand or an exclamation in chat indicates you want to read.
Okay, so begin with stanza 26, a translation by Professor Mose Roberts. As weight anchors lightness and calm governs impulse, the wise leader, all day on the march, stays by his stockage train within his guarded cordon, safely positioned beyond harm's reach. Could the lord of 10,000 wagons of war risk his own self for the sake of the world? Let such lightness lose him his anchoring base, such impulse his role.
Thank you, Kwang. We have a lot of hands up. So let's for Mark, Joe, and Red. Okay. Mark, please.
Okay, my translation is by Jeff Pepper and Xiaohu Kwang. Heavy is the source of light. Stillness is the master of impatience. So the sage travels all day and never leaves his supply wagon. Despite glorious sights, the sage lives apart. This is how he transcends them. How can the master of 10,000 chariots act lightly in public? Act lightly, lose the source. Act with haste, lose the throne.
Thank you, Mark. Joe, please.
Okay, this is from the Derek Lynn translation. Heaviness is the root of lightness. Quietness is the master of restlessness. Therefore, the sages traveled the entire day without leaving the heavy supplies. Even though there are luxurious sights, they are composed and transcend beyond. How can the lords of 10,000 chariots apply themselves lightly to the world? To be light is to lose one's root. To be restless is to lose one's mastery.
Thank you, Joe. Ren, you want to read your version?
Yes. Deem heavy as the root of light. Deem calm as the leader of uproar. Using this, sages walk all day without ever letting go of their heavy load, even while at sublime overview, comfortably perched in transcendence. What do we say then, when a ruler of 10,000 chariots takes the social world lightly compared to his own well-being? Light entails losing the root. Uproar entails losing the leader.
Thank you, Ren. Okay, so let me. Okay, Amang, you want to read version?
Yep.
Okay.
Chapter 26. Heavy equipment. What is heavy is the root of what is light. Rest controls restlessness. Hence, the sage always travels with heavy equipment. Yet staying in his grand tower house, he keeps himself at rest. Why does the ruler of a large state apply his body to the world lightly? Lightness loses its foundation. Restlessness loses its control.
Thank you, Amang. Okay, so first, we'll talk about the title.
Jason, you muted.
Yes, okay. Just 1 minute. Let me. Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, first about the title. The Chinese read 辎重, okay, and by the word translates heavy equipment, but in most of meaning, especially today's meaning, means military equipment. So I'm not sure, is this one is associated with military operation or not? I'm not very sure. Okay, that's the first thing I'd like to talk about. And the second thing, I think this chapter is focused on two pair of words. One is heavy and light, and one is rest and restless. Okay, so they are opposite. So apparently, Dao De Jing will prefer heavy over light. Okay, prefer rest over restless. Okay, so that's the beginning. What is heavy is the root of what is light. Okay, second, the rest control restlessness. Okay, so I think that's end to the end. It's kind of reverse, right? Lightness loses its foundation. Restless loses its control. Okay, so I think that's the essence of this chapter. And I would disagree on a lot of translation, translate the word jing, okay, translate as quiet, okay, because in today's Chinese word jing, this word means quiet, that's true. But in Dao De Jing, this word jing is opposite of movement. So I think this word should translate as rest and the movement, opposite to the movement. So I think that's the reason. And you can see the example talking about the sage, right? When they travel, they keep their heavy equipment. That's the essence of this one. Even they have the grand Tao Guan, okay, that's their grand mansion, okay? But he live, relax, and at rest. Okay, that's the teaching of this chapter. And later on, they say, why does the ruler of large state, or you want to call 10,000 chariot, apply his body to the world lightly? So this sentence seems talking about the feudal lord doing the aggressive work to conquer or attack, doing the military operation against other state. That means put your body in a risk and moving around, which lose the control. Instead of when we say, when we move, we are control something. But in Tao Te Ching, kind of opposite, talking about when you are at rest, you are controlling. I think that's and you are at rest, you are control the restless, control the people moving around. So I think that's the teaching of this chapter. Then let's hear what Amang has something to say.
Well, I'm going to humble brag and say I always really appreciate when you retain a suggestion like this, even after having taken it. For those who have been able to read the screen, you're getting a little insight of how the sausage is made. When Jason and I are doing this translation, I go over it, I offer suggestions like this, and he takes them or not. But I try to give my reasoning for these interpretations or these suggestions. And here we tap on the word gua, which I know some of the translations choose to use the interpretation of that word as vista or view or grand, sort of what you can see from above. I liked the idea of the interpretation of it as a residence. And I really hunted for a good word that sort of combined what Jason had originally put there with the idea of this vista or view that is often a choice of translators. And I hit on this very old Scottish term, tower house, which was a lord's house, an outlook point that could be both residence and military position to sort of look over their land. There is a very militaristic tone to this chapter in talking about not just this particular term, but traveling with heavy equipment, or how one rests only when they are in their residence or tower house. I do think this chapter is, at least in part, speaking to the Sun Tzu being the art of war, as you'd hear it, because there are many stratagem, many guiding principles in that text. And it would be inevitable that a young princeling would need guidance in warfare. And so if he were to go to his teacher and say, so if we're going to have to go on a very heavy campaign or a very, expansive campaign, wouldn't it be best if we travel light and move fast and get in there and conquer? And this, as a response, seems to cut against the grain of that mentality, that you got to be light and responsive and don't get weighted down in investment in the land or the place that you are. Here he's saying, no, that investment in your place is essential for you to have a lodestone to be guiding you, that you should be weighed down. You should carry the weight, the burden of what you intend to do, the heavy equipment of it. And so I think this works both in a sort of historical hermetic or hermeneutic understanding, but it also speaks to modern or contemporary understanding of how do we go about any sort of endeavor. Should we go in lightly? Should we, sort of wash our hands of consequence? I'll apply to this job, I'll apply to that job. And the suggestion here is, no, invest, make the investment, do the hard work. And when you're done with that, rest entirely on not the certainty, but the assurance that your investment is going to bear fruit. It's going to pay off. It's going to do well for you one way or another.
Thank you, Armand. Okay, so let's have a brief discussion about this chapter. And then we have a few hands up. Let's go from Stephen, Mark, and who else? Kwang. Okay.
Somehow my recollection of reading Laozi is do nothing and all gets done. And then when we're talking about all of these things, it's more like being unencumbered within. And the option is all that we're talking about. And it seems to be very easy for us to try to contemporize it and then turn it into something that helps us navigate through our everyday life. But the Dao De Jing is of a whole nother sphere of our inner selves. And he talks about, staying anchored and not focusing on what's outside, getting caught up in the sensory experience. It's about being inside. And the only thing when people are bringing war to this and the art of war, it only brings to mind the Bhagavad Gita. And it's about a battle, but it's an allegory. It's a metaphor, the battle within. Getting past the encumbrances of our own trip. And I like about the Tao Te Ching and Laozi is that it transports me from this nonsensical experience, especially now with where humans are going. And when somebody says, hey, I say, why are you doing that? They say, everybody's doing it. And I just don't do it. I don't have to think about it because look where we are. Look where we've always been. Ridiculous seems to make sense to so many.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Mark, please.
Yeah, thanks. I have two different questions. They're pretty different. So the first one is in English, the word light has at least two really distinct meanings, but they're kind of closely associated conceptually, at least in English. Which is one is like a lack of weight, and the other is like photons, what's generated by the sun. And I'm wondering, I don't think this particular character has any of that photon connotation, but I'm wondering if those concepts are associated in Chinese at all or not. So that's my first question.
Okay,
My
let
second
me
question
let
Go
me
ahead.
respond the first one first. Okay, so basically no. That I at least the word qing means light, lack of weight, nothing about the light or photon light. That so there will be totally different word. So probably I should avoid the word light to which may cause confusion about the light as bright, right? So okay, go ahead for the second question.
All right. So, and then my second question about this, I found Eamon's comments pretty useful in thinking about this because I wasn't really thinking about this in a military context much at all. So some of the history of the characters and the meaning was helpful. So this makes me wonder a little bit about this advice. It seems like this advice seems a little bit polemical, like it's arguing against somebody that might think otherwise. And I'm wondering if I believe Lao Tzu was from the state of Qi on the Shandong Peninsula, and that state was surrounded by other states. So I'm wondering if one might have, which were like other civilized, developed states, if you might have a different attitude about warfare if you were up on the north confronting the Mongols or the Xiongnu or some nomadic people which had a different way of fighting. And I'm wondering if this theory about staying near the baggage train, etc., might have something to do with the particular military geographic conditions of that state or that area of East Central China versus the North, where you might have a different kind of attitude about warfare. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, that's my personal belief. I believe the hint of military operation here could be any state because during that time, even traditionally we talk about Laozi or Dao De Jing is written before Confucius' time, but a few chapters apparently is happened later in the warring state, which is 200 years after Confucius' time. So during the warring state, there's a different state conquer or fight against each other, not necessary to the Northern barbarian, or you want to call the Northern non-Chinese state. Okay, so but it could be anything. But I like what Armand talking about. It kind of opposite than what the Sun Tzu Art of War is talking about. You should move quickly, or you should, it kind of like opposite. So which way was better way to do? I think that's your choice. Okay, so thank you. Kwang, please.
I think this stanza is very interesting in the sense that most of the time I tend to have a metaphorical interpretation, but in this stanza, you have the elements that are very clear for what I call the Hanfeizu interpretation, meaning the very down-to-earth interpretation, meaning that here we are talking, we have expression like the Lord of 10,000 wagons. Wow, that's a title of the king of the time. So here we are talking about someone of very high rank at the time, and we have probably very down-to-earth legalist, if I may use that word, advice for being close to his power base, and be careful not to be too far away from his political power base, because the Tao Te Ching, quite paradoxically, can have a very lofty interpretation, what I would call the Wang Pi interpretation, meaning that it has to be interpreted metaphorically. For example, weight anchors likeness. Weight metaphorically can be understood, of course, as the infinite awareness, and the lightness is the thoughts related to the phenomena. So it's clear that this stanza can be interpreted incompletely metaphorically. But there are many, let's say, hints or clues in the vocabulary that tend to suggest more Hanfeizi interpretation, meaning something very related to the exercise of political power. I stop here.
I think Jason had to step away for a moment. Thank you, Quan. I would say more, but I want to hear everyone else's thoughts. So Nick, go ahead. Nick, you're on mute.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I like to support Quan's reading with metaphysical spin rather than military connotation. Even though obviously, given the historical background, the reference to military affairs is evident in the passage, but the way I read this passage is more metaphysical, because the message in this passage reminds me what Friedrich Nietzsche said about the ancient Greek. He said something like the Greeks were deep because of their superficiality. So this contrast between substantive, heavy versus superficial light is evident here. But the message is clearly that in order to achieve a stage of being easy with life, wu wei, no effort, it actually means a lot of heavy stuff going on, very heavy stuff. It's so deep that you at the end of it, you manage, you navigate, you control, you steer, whatever in such an effortless way. So that is what I read from this passage. One comment on the difference between the Chinese thought and the Greek thought, though. Here is very evident that Laozi and to a large degree Chinese thought in general emphasize on taxity, the sense you get from touching. So the sense of heavy, sense of light, these you don't get from vision, just see it. While the Greek emphasized the vision, you see, you go to theater, you watch, you access the fundamental truth through theorizing, thinking, reflecting the eyes of the soul. But the Chinese thought emphasizes much more on the practical part of our senses. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, I step away. I just want to share with everyone. As another, I think you'll be here long enough, in the meeting, it happened 2 times, have an earthquake, and 1 time have a fire. And right now, if another accident happened, is on the street, the pipe burst, so the entire street lost the water. So that's another small accident. Just want to announce. So go ahead. Mark and Stephen. Okay.
I'm gonna say first, Jason, it's a good thing none of us ascribe to the mandate of heaven because enough natural disasters have befallen you to indicate we should not be doing this.
No, we shall fight against it. So Mark,
Yes,
please.
Oh, sorry.
but also we read, was it last week or the week before, that a flood doesn't last for a whole morning, nor does a sudden shower last a whole day, chapter 23. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. So go ahead.
I was wondering, I also read it metaphorically, and I appreciate what you're saying, everyone, about the military and the practical, down-to-earth aspect of this. Traveling with the heavy equipment, I thought meant traveling with the learning. But I'm sure that it can mean many things at one time. My question is really about the translation of most of the translations I've looked at suggest that the carts are not out of someone's sight, as if they're afraid that they're going to be stolen. He does not get far away from his carts. He does not leave his bags unattended. He does not let them out of his sight. He will not. I'm just wondering, I don't think you have another verb in the relationship between the sage and the heavy equipment. Sometimes it seems like there's another verb put in.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, I think that's very important. If we read this one, right? Here we translate as a 圣人 sage, but I think there's another version. Okay, the words is not sage, it's 君子. Okay, so so let me share the screen. Okay, so I think you make a very important point here. Okay, the sage, all you want to read as 君子. 君子 we shall understand as a low-ranking officer. Okay, the low-ranking officer always travel with heavy equipment. That means the military supply. So if you think about this one as a metaphor, right? He's talking about the teacher, the Laozi is talking about the military operation. The officer always travel with the military supply, heavy supply. Okay, that's the fact. Okay, because you during the war you have to travel with all the heavy equipment. Okay, and then the teacher, okay, use this fact as a teaching point. See, they travel with a heavy point. Why? Because heavy is important. You should be heavy and you should at rest, not moving around. I think that's the point this stanza or this chapter try to make. I hope I explained it clearly, Mark.
I would also add to this that even the very title, Zizhang, in modern parlance, this could refer to your luggage being packed onto a train. And so I do think there is a little bit of presentism in some translations, but it literally does mean provisions heavy. Those are those two words.
Stephen, please.
So words mean things. Sometimes we give them the meanings. The more words it takes to explain, the less plain. The meaning resonates not through the words, but what resonates within one. So the different interpretations, but I will reiterate, I don't see, I just can't see Laozi, you know, talking about conventional war. It just seems so incongruous with what the Dao De Jing and what the spirit of it is. But I understand people's views, but I will not repeat it anymore because no matter how many times I say what I say, it doesn't make that word, it doesn't make what I'm saying real or true. Where can we go? And early in the Dao De Jing, in the first couple of sentences, that once you give it a word, it's finished, but yet we still hang on words. We're slipping away from the subtlety and the depth of meaning that can transpire within us and not help us navigate, but help us be at peace, to do nothing, yet everything gets done. But here we are trying to figure it out, and we get tongue-tied, we get brain-tied, and then we become with a minefield in our minds. It is
Yeah,
so
Stefan,
simple.
I agree with you. I agree with you. So what do you think the baggage is here in this chapter?
The baggage is the emphasis. Well, when he's well, to say baggage is lugging, right? Is that I'm not fully grasping to get the subtleties of each particular thing. But what I would say is baggage is cumbersome. Like I said before, it's the cumbersome aspect of our minds, of different things like that. So he's saying stay close to it, but then it seems to relate to the depth within us and the depth of grasping meaning, and stay with that and don't get lost with the luring of the senses. And when he says don't get lost looking at this and looking at that, stay within and see within from within as opposed to being out there, so to speak, in modern day language.
Let me address this because I agree. The sentiment of the Tao Te Ching is to turn one away from conventional understandings. And even this verse, as a response to the Song Si Bing Fa, is a turning away from a conventional understanding. But as a response, it was necessary. The Tao Te Ching forms part of a pan-Asian corpus of works. We think of this in terms of the West as the discourse that forms Western philosophy, one thinker writing and speaking in response to another. Alfred Lord Whitehead, all of Western philosophy is footnotes to Plato. From the inception of the warring states, actually in the springs and autumn, the Sun Tzu Bing Fa was written and became a text that was desirable for most of these princelings because of the conditions of the world around them. By the time we get to the teachings of Laozi, this would have already been part of that corpus of Chinese philosophy, and it demanded a response to keep someone from taking a conventional understanding of warfare, but to treat it as a discrete text independent of the environment in which it grew out of is to grossly misunderstand the text and the period.
Let me say this. I appreciate the point of view. I didn't read any book until I was 18. I didn't want any ideas. It's a very strange thing. But the first book I read was The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. And it was a wonderful book to read, to be able to march forward within absorption. But I must say that the conventional things and the fact of what's contextually happening, I understand that too. but nothing of any of those things seem to be anything that overrides influencing, swaying, or this answering. This is on a whole nother sphere to me. And I'm glad that I don't have so much information. I'm glad that I didn't learn so much that it's hard to just take something and apply. I know this is a very hard thing, pure objectivity in absorption. And without anything else coming in to sway you, just take it for a minute. But when we don't have that faculty working, all of these other things come into place. When I was 7 years old and I was learning, right? Anytime somebody explained something to me, I noticed it. I always said, this is like that. Everything had to be like, you know what I mean? Understanding and seeing had to be bringing something close to something else. But the objectivity allows one to see it purely. So let it be that I stop listening and I hear. Let it be that I close my eyes and I begin to see and comprehend. And it's not with the senses that these things happen, but something stirs here that I don't feel that it was any response to the what was going on around, which was chaos. It was a refuge, or somebody shared something of a world within themselves that allowed them to bring something to the world, but never depart from that inner world and live it. Live it. That was the thing too. They walked it. They breathed it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing your view. Let's move on. We have Darren, Huang, and Kunj. Okay, Darren, please.
So I just have a question about this text here.
Mhm.
So my favorite parts of this, I think the most interesting part of this are the first two lines and the last two lines. Hang on. So let me look at
Yeah.
your version. You structure it differently. So I'm talking about the first 8 characters and the last 8 characters in your version. I'm
Yeah.
looking at the Derek Lin version.
Yeah,
So
that's the first two line and the last two
yeah.
line. Yeah.
So it's very interesting because it recycles the same characters in the different patterns.
Mhm.
And they're also very poetic. So I'll read it in Cantonese. It rhymes in a very poetic way. Again, this is like a Cantonese version. It's probably different in classical Chinese, but there could be similarities because Cantonese was a very conservative language. So
Cantonese are more classical than Mandarin. That's pretty sweet. Okay.
yeah, because I think there were like Cantonese people were all stuck in the south, so they didn't have all the influences from the north and all the cultural
Yeah,
influences
go
from
ahead. Yeah.
anyway, okay. 中为輕根，正為躁君. And then the
Mhm.
last two lines are 輕則失根，躁則失君. So it has this very resonant poetry to it. And it almost sounds like bells actually, because it's always hitting those high tones. So yeah, I'll just make my observation, and I'm just interested in what anyone else might glean from these 4 lines. And I mean, and it is significant that these are the first 2 lines and the last 2 lines. So that's also seems to make them stand out. So one thing I kind of noticed is that in the first 2 lines it says 中為輕根. So it's saying Derelict's translation, heaviness is the root of lightness.
Mhm.
But then is like heaviness is the root of lightness, or is like a light root or something like that, if you want to do verbatim. But then in the second at the ending it says hing satkan. It's to lose one's root. So it seems to take it one step further. And then similarly, if you look at the second line, compare the second and the second line and the last line. So it's about 正為躁君. It's about so Derek Lin translates this as quietness is the master of restlessness. But then the last line, which corresponds to that one, it's talking about losing one's mastery altogether. So I don't know. I find it seems like the last 2 lines take the thinking here, or the meaning here, like one step further in a way. It's like it's like about losing one's root entirely and losing one's mastery entirely. Whereas Whereas the first two lines is talking about being the master of restlessness. It's mastering something. So, okay, that's fine. But at the very end, it's talking about losing mastery entirely. And similar with the lightness part, it's a talk about heaviness is a root of lightness. But then the second last line, the corresponding line, it says to be light is to lose one's root altogether. So anyway, there's just something very complex going here, especially because it's recycling words in different patterns. Anyway, so that's just my observation. I'll be interested if anyone else has thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. Yeah, I think that's very common in the ancient Chinese writing. Okay, sometimes they just reorganize the word, and then because it doesn't use the Western or Aristotelian logic, right? So basically the way to convince you is talking in this way and the reverse, and then make it as a pattern and to convince you. That's I realize, especially in Dao De Jing or even in the Confucius. Okay, they try to convince you in this way.
Convince or confuse. For me, it's confuse.
Convince. I'm sorry.
For me personally, sometimes it confuses me more than convince me.
The reason is we speak Chinese, we will all learn in the Western world, right? In the Western logic world. So when we look back the ancient writing, sometimes we find out it's illogical, but we need to understand, because the ancient Chinese doesn't use the Aristotelian logical, okay, to like a syllogism to convince you. They use the advantage of the Chinese character as a pattern, as a poetry to convince you. Okay, so that's my opinion. Yeah, Kwang, please.
Yes. I would say that maybe line 7 and 8 of the stanza is the center of that stanza, okay? Because at least line 7 and 8 of my translation by Professor Mose Roberts, could the Lord of 10,000 chariots risk his own life for the whole world? Because those two lines are really at the center of what I call the mythology of the Chinese ruling class, okay? And that is also the mythology of the Eastern Asian ruling class in general. In the sense that I said in my first intervention that it can be read metaphorically or it can be read in a very down-to-earth manner related to political considerations. While precisely in the mind, in the mythology of the Chinese ruling class, there is no difference between those two. In the sense that you are worthy to be a ruler only if you have a self-mastery of yourself, of your reality, okay? So the first two lines is about what is heavy is the root of what is light, rest controls restlessness. It's clear for me that anyone used with meditation or with Chinese philosophy, it's about the center of absolute consciousness and about my phenomena that revolve around absolute consciousness at the center. But for the mythology of the Chinese ruling class, that is precisely the core, the center, the root of any ruler. If you don't rule your own mind, you cannot rule your officers, your ministers, people, because you are at the center, you heavy, you stable, you at a your mind is at rest because the thoughts are not controlling you. What is at the center and that is heavy precisely is that center of absolute consciousness or infinite awareness. So when I was saying that there is always a Han-Feizi interpretation, meaning a political interpretation, and a Wang Pi interpretation, meaning a metaphorical epistemological interpretation for any stanza of Laozi, it is the natural reading of the Laozi because it reflects the mentality, the way to think of the Chinese ruling class 3,000 years ago and who has influenced everyone around in Japan, in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Laos, in in Korea, etc., in Mongolia, etc., because you cannot rule a country, an empire, if you cannot rule yourself. So the two readings are simultaneous in my mind. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwang. The next one, Kunj. How to pronounce your name?
It's Kunj.
Kunj. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so just to chime in on the discussion that was happening earlier about context in history, I think that I sort of agree with Stefan a bit, that I think that since saints like these, like Lao Tzu, get this knowledge from going into, like they're mystics. So once one is a mystic, because any of this kind of wisdom comes from some kind of a mystical journey into deep, deep, deep consciousness or deep eternal realms where eternal knowledge comes to you. So this is eternal knowledge. It has always existed. It will always continue to exist. So I do see the sense in ignoring the history and the context a bit, because that would be the last thing that would matter to something that is eternal knowledge. And that's what makes Lao Tzu so great, is because it's completely separate from the time that it's set within, almost, although it uses the language of the time and it uses perhaps the poetic sensibility of the time at the same time. I think Eric Newman has a great book on this called Art in the Unconscious, where he talks about how the sense of the time does go into this absolute knowledge, but the absolute knowledge is absolute knowledge. And but what Kwon said right now also makes sense to me, that although I don't think it would be historically specific that Lao Tzu would be talking about exactly that period, but the archetype of, like, the Jungian archetype of, say, like a king figure or the ruling class could come up in the works of in what is he's writing, because once he's expressing these great ideals can also be, something that the ruling class should imbibe, because once one is great, one becomes the king in some sense, and one has to become the king of the world, or the king of the empire that one is in. And perhaps there is the archetype of the king or the ruling class that could seep into the writings of Lao Tzu, and that wouldn't be surprising, I think.
All right. Thank you, Stephen, and then Ren.
I might not be phrasing this exactly right, but the gist of it is only he is fit to, the only real, well, let me just say, only the one that knows how to follow is fit to lead. But I think it was presented in reverse. If you're not fit to lead if you don't know how to follow. So it's being in touch with. And then I came out with my own poem was, is it not the leader who is led by the people behind him needs? You see, it's a connection. It's a connection. It's not a separation. And yes, I think there was a point where even the Greeks said that the philosophers should be the rulers, because as we've been saying over and over again, to harness one's own self, create something that's so beautiful, and even to say power, it dilutes it, but such a strength to harness our own powers. Like we got AI now, right? They're saying we're getting all kind of powers, but we're not cultivating the ability to harness. And so goes the mind, so goes knowledge. We have to harness within ourselves. And I think that's what he's beckoning at all times. If we do that, we're navigating without a willfulness. We're absorbing in a natural, organic way, but we're never separate. But we're in our own world too. We're not out there.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Ren, please. Then we probably need to move on. Okay.
Yes. So I was looking at a few quotes that were put on a specific translation that I was looking at. And one of them is, heavy refers to the body, light refers to what is external to the body, success and fame, wealth and honor. Still refers to our nature. Busy refers to our emotions. People forget their body and chase external things. They forget their nature and follow their emotions. The sage isn't like this. Even though he travels all day, he doesn't leave what sustains him. And then another great quote was, when a lord travels for pleasure, he rides in the passenger cart. When a lord travels to war, he rides in a military cart. Both of these are light carts, and behind these come the heavier supply carts. Even though a lord might travel 50 kilometers a day in a passenger cart or 30 kilometers a day in a military cart, he does not hurry so far ahead that he loses sight of the supply cart behind him. And I thought those quotes just really resonated with the meaning behind this chapter. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, that's great. Yeah.
Can I ask what Rain? Can I ask what Rain was reading from?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
One moment, let me go up.
Yeah, you can put in the chat, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The new translation that I was looking at. So
Yeah. Okay. So that
I'll
yeah, put in the chat, and we can have the many interpretation as we want, and then Amang and I doing this one is based on the Chinese word we read, and then we try to be honored to what the Chinese words present, and of course it's never be clear enough. So that's why I leave a lot of room for everyone to interpret. And that's the beauty of this meetup and the beauty of reading Tao Te Ching. Okay, let's move on for chapter 27. I believe Kwang, you want to take a lead to read, please.
Okay, so I still read the translation by Professor Most Roberts, stanza 27. Expert marching leaves no trails. Expert wording has no flaws. Expert reckoning needs no police. Well-sealed doors have no crossbar, yet cannot be opened. When tie knots employ no cord, yet cannot be loosened. Accordingly, the wise know how to sandwich man and make sure none go to waste. They know how to sandwich things and make sure none go to waste. That is called far-reaching insight. The expert learns from the expert and draws lessons from the unfit. Not to value the teacher, not to hold dear his subjects, is misguided in even the most learned. This is called the crucial secret.
Thank you, Kwang. Anyone want to read different version? No?
I can read one.
Oh, wait, who the other
Darren?
person go? I was gonna volunteer if no one else does, but the other person should go.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I'm just going to read the Lao.
Okay, this is all. Go ahead.
One who excels in traveling leaves no wheel tracks. One who excels in speech makes no slips. One who excels in reckoning uses no counting rods. One who excels in shutting uses no bolts, yet what he has shut cannot be opened. One who excels in tying uses no cords, yet what he has tied cannot be undone. Therefore, the sage always excels in saving people, and so abandons no one. Always excels in saving things, and so abandons nothing. This is called following one's discernment. Hence, the good man is the teacher the bad man learns from, and the bad man is the material the good works on. Not to value the teacher, nor to love the material, though it seems clever, betrays great bewilderment. This is called the essential and the secret.
Thank you. Chapter 27, Among.
Chapter 27, The Hidden Intelligence. Good movement leaves no traces of wheels. Good speech leaves no flaws to blame. Good counting uses no counters. Good closure needs no bolts, yet it cannot be opened. Good ties make no knots, yet they cannot be untied. Therefore, the sages are often good at saving people, because no one is abandoned as useless. They are often good at saving things, because nothing is abandoned as useless. This is called the hidden intelligence. Therefore, good people are teachers of the bad people. Bad people are a resource for good people. Those who don't value the teachers or don't care about the resources will be confused, even if they are intelligent. This is called essential subtlety.
Thank you, Amam. Okay. First, the title, and also in the translation. I think if you read the other translation, I'll say this is called following the intelligence. Okay. So I think the word 习明, okay, I translate as a hidden intelligence instead of following intelligence. The reason is this: 习, this word in there's three meanings. One means following. Okay. One also means attacking. Okay. You attack somebody. And another one, I think I take as a hidden, because I take the root, the meaning of the word during that time. That means the underwear, okay, for the dead people. So covered, okay. So that's a kind of underwear. So that means hidden, in my opinion. Okay, and then you can understand why a lot of translation translate as following. The reason I don't translate as following intelligence is compare with the sentence, right? Those who don't value the teacher or don't care about the resources will be confused, even if they are intelligent. So in the Chinese, is read as 虽智大迷. Okay, even you have intelligence, but you were still confused. Even you are enlightened, but you were confused. Okay, that's the reason I feel this one is talking about two kinds of intelligence, two kinds of understanding. One is hidden, okay, the hidden intelligence. One is apparent intelligence. Okay, so that's why they talk about the hidden intelligence, because when you move, you leave no trace of wheel. You speak, there's no flaws to blame. You can't, you don't use counter. You close something, the closure, you don't use bolt to close the door, but it cannot be opened. You tie something without knot. Okay, that's why it's talking about hidden intelligence, which is not so obvious. Okay, and that's the reason I make I translate as hidden intelligence instead of following the intelligence. And another thing is, you will see all start with good movement, good speech, good counting, good closure, good tie. Okay, so because the Chinese word "san," you can see every verse start with "san," and I'm pretty always translate this "san" as good, and the good doesn't mean the good in morality. It means good in skills. That's why a lot of translation translate as expert or skillful. Okay, so I translate as good. Okay, so that's the teaching of this subject. Basically, is talking about the intelligent. If you are good, okay, you are skillful, you are expert, you are not so obvious. Okay, so you leave no trace. You don't use, it doesn't look like you. So another Chinese idiom is talking about the great intelligence may appear to be stupid. Okay, so you look, some people are not that smart, but actually he has great intelligence. That's so-called hidden intelligence. I think that's the essence of this chapter. So let's hear what Amang had to say. Oh, and one more thing I want to, no, I think that's it. Let Amang talk about this. Amang, go ahead.
Thank you. I dropped the etymology of "shi" into the chat, and it's two parts to that word. The top half of the character is the word long, or dragon, and the bottom half is yi, or clothes. This means underwear. In very, very sort of mundane language, shi means underwear. It's what you'd wear underneath everything else. It's the dragon's skin that enshrouds you. And so another way of looking at those two words is dragon enlightenment or underwear enlightenment, to put it in another sort of parlance. I like the translation of this as hidden intelligence, because yeah, what you wear underneath is hidden, it's unobservable, and the idea of being as enlightenment or intelligence works here in the sense that, what is the lesson being conveyed? That there's a way to do these things that don't announce themselves, don't display themselves, don't foster ruts or problems for themselves, or something that you will be bound to have to address after the fact. Good closure needs no bolt. You don't have to unbolt it, but it can't be opened unless you want it opened. Good counting needs no abacus. You don't have to hear the click, clack, clack. Good speech leaves no flaws, and wheels leaving no trace. Ruts in a road at that time were a nuisance. It became necessary. You had to be in the ruts to go from one position to another. That's why Qin Shi Huangdi regulated axle length when he united China. And so what is the intelligence behind this sort of acumen, this sort of skill level? And it's to know what's worth keeping and what's worth abandoning. And the sage understands everything's worth keeping. Nothing is to be abandoned. There's a use, a practical reason for good people, bad people, the designations that we want to give them. They do something for others. Somebody mentioned this sounds almost very Confucian in terms of good people, bad people, being a teacher, being a resource. These schools aren't mutually exclusive to one another. They were not like, you know, the Vikings and the Packers, never the two shall not collide. They were collaborative. They were in agreement on some issues. And the value of people was certainly an issue that these two schools saw very eye to eye on. However, Confucius would say the value is there so that they must be elevated. And Lao Tzu might respond by saying, elevate if you want, but even those abject bad examples are of themselves a good thing to have. I like to think of this in terms of what my brother once told me when we had to go to the theater. He was a film major and we watched the movie Bats. And I said, why did we do this? He said, because sometimes you have to watch a bad movie to know what a good movie is. I think that's the lesson that's imparted here as well.
Okay. Thank you, Armand. Okay, so that's a brief discussion about this chapter. Please focus on this chapter. We have Stephen and Kwang, please.
Forgive me if I vary in some way. Sometimes I'm just moved by what is stirred by the chapter. But intelligence, hidden. I looked up one day the word intelligence, and it said nothing about information or education. It simply said that dealing with new situations with existing information. In other words, you're presented with something you have no reference at all, or something, the intuitive within ourselves, the hidden intelligence. And then it's mentioning all of these forms of accounting and figuring things out. And he's saying there's another intelligence and it's hidden. And it's the one that if we deal with these faculties within us that are not attached to our everyday way of assessing, accounting, or deducing, that if we put them all aside, something else emerges within us. And this is the hidden intelligence, which is not knowing, not needing to know, yet grasping in a way that things flow. Perhaps.
Thank you. Kwang, please.
Yes, first, I would like to say that this stanza and the two or three before this stanza, often there is a mention that is not present in the Quotian version. Okay, the Quotian version is from 300 BCE, and the Ma Wang Tui version is from 168 BCE, and the received version, meaning the version of the Imperial Academy, is from 124 BCE. So why do I want to mention those dates? It's because the Quotian version is an older version, and it doesn't have those considerations, meaning that there is a maturation in the thing and in the philosophical elaborations compared to the version of 300 BCE and the version of 168 BCE and the version of 124 BCE. As during that time, there is a lot of philosophizing and of epistemological development. And the more the version is closer to the version of the Imperial Academy, meaning the 124 BC version, the more you have epistemological consideration. And I would like to explain it with the stanza that is in my mind divided in two parts, at least in my translation is very obvious, is 1 to 7 verses 8 to 18. The Professor Mose Roberts wrote that he doesn't see, how can I say it, a link between the two groups of verses, but I am surprised by his comment because the link is obvious for me. Because this stanza reminds a lot of the story in Chuangzi about a butcher who is capable to cut a beef, but at the same time to maintain the blade sharp as during the first day. Okay, even if he used the same blade, let's say for 10 years, at the end of the 10th years, the blade, 19 years. 19 yeah, thank years. You for the precision. Yes, the blade is still as sharp as during the first day. So I think that this story is the perfect reflection of the first seven lines, in the sense that when you do things in the skillful manner or in expert manner, intelligent manner, you don't break your tools. Okay, you use them with softness and with intelligence. And when you use things or people, okay, I'm sorry to say such a brutal phrase than to use people, but let's say to interact with people, it's better. When you use things or when you interact with people in an intelligent manner, you use them. Okay, you in the sense that you don't break them. You let them flourish and become more themselves than forcing them pattern. And here, and especially that we interact a lot with other people by words. Okay, so expert wording has no flaws, in the sense that in our interaction we use a lot of words, and if we're not skillful, we're not delicate, we're not intelligent in the use of words, it would have a lot of flaws, and it would hurt people, and their blade would not stay as sharp as in the first day. And the second part from verse 8 to verse 18, well, I think it's the consequence of, if you are expert, if you're skillful, if you're good, well, you will not waste things and you will not waste people. Okay, so that's the consequence of being skillful or expert or good in interacting with people or in using things. And finally, the last part, the experts or the skillful or the good learns from the expert, from the good, and draw a lesson from the unfit. Not to value the teacher, not to hold dear his subjects, is misguided in even the most learned. This is called the crucial secret. And once again, the crucial secret is to be careful, is to be intelligent. And I will stop with my usual pedantic proclivity. Intelligence is from two Latin words, intellus legere. And intellus legere means to see, to read far or deep inside. Okay? So to be intelligent is to be precisely anchor in that heaviness of infinite awareness in the epistemological interpretation that I usually offer, as has been proposed in the stanza just before, the stanza 26. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwang. Okay, I think that's a very good example to check, to compare with Zhuangzi. I think it's in chapter 3, inner chapter 3. It's a famous story about the cooking, okay, dissect or cut the oxen. So then we have two mark. Okay, let's go mark. Okay. Yeah, you.
Yeah, thanks. So in looking at this, I want to really thank Jason for his comments about how the good Sean, Sean, I think it's fourth tone,
Yeah.
can also be translated as skill. I think the first version of the Tao Te Ching I ever read, at least in this chapter, I remember the skilled speaker and the skilled, it referenced skill 4 times instead of good. And when I'm going over this, when reading about the good man teaching the bad man, I noticed, like my dictionary, my modern Chinese dictionary, says the opposite of Shan is which is, I think, I'm probably not pronouncing it well, but it's like got Asia on the top and heart on the bottom, and usually translated into English as evil. But the Dao De Jing here doesn't use evil; it says Bushan, and that made me curious about the contrast of these two words in modern time versus ancient time. So I did a search through the entire text of Dao De Jing for Shan, and there was like 100 hits. And I did a search for and there wasn't a single hit, not one. So the point that why I think this is important is because I think there's a big difference between ancient thinking and modern thinking, and particularly between Chinese thinking and non-Chinese thinking, or outside of China, both in the ancient world, but to a lesser extent in the modern world. with regards to moral dualism and its significance and dominance in the way that people think. And to me, the usage of the translation of the term shan as skill rather than good, or vice versa, uh, kind of shows this cleavage. Like a person who grew up, a modern person, especially one who grew up outside of China, I think is definitely more likely to think of this in a moral context, good and evil, versus more of like a practical context. And even a modern Chinese person, I suspect, is more likely to think that way than an ancient Chinese person. So I just wanted to bring up those points and see if anybody had any comment on them. That's it. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Okay. Thank you to bring up this one, but need to this word sun I use as good, but sometimes I think in chapter 2 I probably use as beauty or beautiful. The reason is it depends on how it used, because if sun used with another word called okay, that means evil. That means sun means moral good. If you use sun, okay, this word with you start this words with moral good, okay, and then no, I'm sorry, okay, sun, but in Dao De Jing, this sun sometimes used with the word in this case, sun would means moral good. If it doesn't use with the word that means it's skillful good, okay, good in skill. Okay, that's my interpretation. And here, in this one, it doesn't use the word you use busan, that means negative of san, that means not skillful, which doesn't mean evil. Okay, so that's the point. And thank you to bring up this one. Mark, please. The other Mark.
The more I was thinking and listening to everybody, the more I began to think, is this also a metaphor for the Tao Te Ching itself? Is it perfect speech, like a jade worker whose tool leaves no mark? Or in your translation, good speech leaves no flaws to blame? Then can we say that the work itself, in its movement, leaves no traces, that it uses no counters, that it needs no bolts, but can be held fast? That's one, I guess, another metaphorical interpretation. The other thing was the question, which I think I've asked about before, the word light. In a number of the translations I read for 27, the word light as in illumination comes in. And I know this is in your idea of the hidden intelligence. I'm just wondering if light makes its appearance.
Excuse me, I didn't get the question. You are asking a question?
The
Mark?
word light does not appear, does it?
The word light, yes, it appear. You mean light means the light as a photon, or the light
Yes.
as a
Yes,
yes,
like
it
photon.
appear. Okay, that's put this way. Okay, let me see, chapter 20. Okay, mean. Okay, I translate as enlightenment or intelligent. Okay, that's the word. Okay, if you know this, okay, that means the light, bright. Okay, so a lot of time I translate as enlightenment, okay, or intelligence. Okay, so that's the word appear here, and also in
The character
Ximing.
literally is the sun and moon.
Yeah, so it means very bright, and usually it uses metaphor or metaphorically. Okay, means understand, enlightened.
And is the the chapter referring to itself reflexively to the Tao Te Ching itself, that is, it moves without forming any pathway.
That's right. I agree with you. Yeah. Yeah, you can refer to the entire Dao De Jing teaching. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's definitely a Wu Wei subtext to that portion, and that is very in keeping with the overall message of the Tao Te Ching.
Okay, so let's move on to chapter 28. Okay, so we will require two reading. Huang, I believe you would like to
Yes.
read. Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
28.
So yes, stanza 28, still the translation by Professor Mose Roberts. Acknowledge the male, but retain the female. Be a drain way for the world below the sky, as a drain way for the world below the sky. Your constant power will never depart, will lead back home to infancy. Acknowledge the white, but remember the black. Be a measure for the world below the sky, as a measure for the world below the sky. Your constant power will never decline, will lead back home to before duality. Acknowledge honors, but remember humility. Be a valley for the world below the sky, as a valley for the world below the sky. Your constant power will suffice, will lead home to stock simplicity. As simplicity disintegrated, useful things were forged. These were the words that wise men went by when serving as officers and enders. For fine cutters never harmed a stone.
Thank you, Kwang. Yuan, please.
Recognize the male, but hold unto the female, and be the world's maid. Being the world's maid, don't lose your ancient virtue. Not losing your ancient virtue, be a newborn child again. Recognize the pure, but hold unto the defiled, and be the world's valley. Being the world's valley, be filled with ancient virtue. Being filled with ancient virtue, be uncarved wood again. Recognize the white, but hold unto the black, and be the world's guide. Being the world's guide, don't stray from ancient virtue. Not straying from ancient virtue, be without limits again. Uncarved wood can be split to make tools. The sage makes it his chief official. A master tailor doesn't cut.
Thank you. Who is the translator, Ren?
The same one that I had put in the chat.
That's
fine.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's 28.
Chapter 28. Common De. Knowing masculinity, but maintaining femininity, is to be the stream of the world. To be the stream of the world, from which common De never departs, is to return to infancy. Knowing the white, but maintaining the black, is to be the exemplar of the world. To be the exemplar of the world, which common De never deviates from, is to return to infinity. Knowing honor, but maintaining disgrace, is to be the valley of the world. To be the valley of the world, which common De suffices, is to return to genuineness, an uncarved block of wood. When the uncarved block is divided up as tools, sages use them to set up a system of officials and administrators. It's better to keep the block undivided, because the great system is undivided. The great tailor doesn't cut.
Thank you, Amam. A few things I'd like to talk about on this one. First, the translation I translate as 德, okay, 德, because some translation translate as virtue, translate as power. The reason I keep this one, 德 as without doing translation, because Tao Te Ching, the second word, 德, so I don't believe Tao and the 德 should translate to any word because that's the subject. So 德 has the meaning of virtue, has the meaning of power. So 常德 I will usually translate as instead of constant, and some I heard some translation translate as ancient 德. Okay, and I translate the word 常 as common. Okay, so that means every day. Okay, in a way you can call it eternal because it's every day. So that's the way Amang and I work on this version. And I think the message is quite clear. So basics, let's say most of people traditionally believe male masculinity is more powerful than female, but here Laozi tell us, okay, even we know male is more powerful, but we maintain as a female metaphorically, right? And white and black. In this way, I believe white means yang, yin and yang, black means yin. We will say yang is better and yin is not that good, but we knowing that, but we maintain yin side. We know the honor is good, we know disgrace is bad, but we maintain on the disgrace side, but knowing that's honor. You don't have to be show off. I think that's the way you want the teaching about this chapter. So important words about infancy, infinity, and genuineness. Okay, and some translation translate as simplicity. I agree, but the word, the original word, you will see this word basically related to the wood. So I think the proper translation should be uncarved wood. You can imagine, okay, visually, okay, uncover. That's the teaching on that. So to me, this word pu, okay, is very important because I check in the chapter this chapter 15, chapter 19, 28, 32, 37, 57, all talking about pu, this word. So I will argue the two most important lessons in the entire 81 chapter of Dao De Jing is politically is wu wei, so-called non-action. For the personal cultivation, your personal lesson is pu. You should become an uncarved wood or uncarved block of wood. Okay, so I think that's a very important lesson. So I also like to further explain the last part of the word, right? When the uncarved block is divided up as tools, sage use them to set up system of officer and administrator. So therefore, or you want to say because the great system is undivided, or the great tailor doesn't cut. This one, okay, the word 智 has two meanings. Okay, one it means the tailor. So just like a previous chapter, right? The good movement leave no trace of will, right? The good counter use no counter. The good content use no counter. So same thing as this one. A great tailor doesn't really cut. Okay. So in another way, it also means the same word also means system. Okay, the same word also means system. So if you take this word as system, that means a great system is undivided, is not cutting. So you can see this the same word have the two meaning, and both work for this chapter. So I believe the author probably used this double meaning of the Chinese word to teach. Basically, it's talking about the great tailor doesn't cut, okay, and the great system is undivided, okay, because you should keep as a whole. That's the belief of Dao De Jing, the Taoism teaching. So that's the teaching on this one. So we will go to Amang, please.
Yeah, there's been some very quintessential Dao De Jing teachings within the last 3 chapters about inaction, about achieving without striving, and about keeping yourself genuine, natural, unpolished, unground, uncarved. And as somebody pointed out, I think it was Darren pointed out before in the last chapter, it had a very Confucian sort of feel or tone. And as I mentioned in 25 or 26, the Tao Te Ching is part of a discourse. The art of war was part of that discourse. The analytics are part of that discourse. And so adopting their trappings to teach the lessons was an effective stratagem. Here, we abandon some of those sort of rhetorical devices of speaking to those others to really drive home a point. Yes, this point could be seen as a direct contradiction to Confucianism, but it is what's more importantly at the heart of the Dao De Ching, which is a naturalness, a genuineness, a acceptance of not being the first, the best, the most revered, the most respected, the most admired, because only in taking the lesser position, the lesser perceived position, does real power lie or rest. When it talks about knowing masculinity but maintaining femininity, I think Lao Tzu was only too aware of how much power women yielded within the kingdom, and very subtly, very unregarded by the rest of the male-dominated society, knowing the white but maintaining the black, knowing what will be obvious, knowing what would be young, exciting, engaging, showy, out there, but maintaining the yin, the black, the hidden, the deeper. That's going to make you an enduring example to others. And accepting disgrace, knowing honor, but maintaining disgrace. This is probably the most antithetical teaching to the norms of society of his time, because to be disgraced would be, even in modern China, to lose face is anathema. It is the worst thing that can happen. And his advice is, no, lose face. Who cares? It's not actually that important. Be willing to lose face, because if you are, you will really be in a position to move the levers of life in a very, very significant way. That's what he talks about, an undivided system. The system that exists underneath the constructed system of man-made institutions and norms and expectations. That system is going to roll right on with or without people's acknowledgement. But if you're aware of it, if you're paying attention to it, and if you can just pluck a pebble into the stream at the right point, you can set the whole barge coasting adrift. Lao Tzu gave the world's first lesson in soft power. And those who really got good at this were some of the most influential human beings in Asian history. Unfortunately, many would be unbeknownst to us because being infamous was also not necessarily the lesson. Maintaining a very obsequious manner was.
Thank you, Amam. Okay, so let's have a brief discussion about this chapter. We have Mark and Darren. Okay, Mark, please.
Yeah, thanks. I really like Amon's points about the value of being willing to lose faith and Lao Tzu as being like a teacher of soft power. Those were eloquent for me. The reason I put my hand up is because I wanted to really appreciate Jason not translating day. It's of course super common in Dao De Jing to not translate Dao, except for like the second instance of line one, chapter one. But because that's the thing you're trying to learn too. But I think day is also important, and my impression is that day, the historical cultural context has actually changed a lot since when this was written in modern China. And so I think that that's really helpful to leave it that way and let people figure out what it's by its context in the book. So I just wanted to appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Yeah, in today's world, I think in during the Dao De Jing time, ancient time, this word "de" doesn't have the, well, at least in the Taoism, "de" doesn't have its moral sense. But in the Confucianism and the Confucianism, or in today's world, this word has its moral sense. So I think that's the difference, and that's why I prefer not translate the word, to virtue or something else. Darren, please.
Two little comments, I guess. If the lesson of this chapter is to not be afraid of losing face, then then Chinese civilization hasn't learned much from it then. Because saving face is still like, the paramount thing after 2 millennia. Okay. Regarding the I just have a I guess a comment about the translation at the very end. So the last line has confused me before, but I think I've sorted it out so that it makes sense for myself. So the last line, gu dai zai ba gok. So hang on, I'm trying to find your translation. Okay, here it is. You translated as because the great system is undivided. So I'll just read the whole last sort of part here. So when the uncarved block is divided up as tools, sages use them to set up a system of officials and administrators. Yeah, okay. Because the great system is undivided. So that like is confusing because like, so when the uncarved block is divided up, sages use them to set up systems of officials, administrators, because the great system is undivided. So I know this other translators sort of do the same thing as you. So like Derek Lin is kind of similar. He says the sages use those blocks that they cut up and then become leaders. Thus, the greater whole is undivided. Like, it doesn't seem to follow. Like, what do you mean? Thus, the greater whole is undivided. Like, it just talked about the sages cutting up the blocks of wood to make them into and to become leaders, or as your translation, to set up a system of governance. I think maybe another way to translate the last line would be therefore don't divide the whole, the greater whole. And I think this makes sense because when it says in the previous lines that the sage is taking the blocks, cutting them up, and then setting up, becoming leaders or setting up a system of administrators, that's actually like, given the whole gist of this chapter, that's actually a bad thing. Like, like that's something we don't want. That's like, that's all the hierarchy stuff and Confucianism that Taoism is just like completely against. So we're supposed to already understand that by the time we get to this line, like they become leaders or set up a system of leadership. And so when we realize that is not a good thing, then the last line makes sense. So when you translate it as therefore don't divide the greater whole, or leave the greater whole undivided. So I'm just suggesting that as another interpretation of the last line, so that it sort of makes sense. I think it can be translated as therefore leave the greater whole undivided, because um, the previous lines we're supposed to understand as a bad thing when the block becomes, when the sage divides the blocks into these leadership and all that stuff. We'd be like, oh no, that's not good, and so therefore leave the greater whole undivided. So anyway, that's just my suggestion.
Well, I think you make a very good point. I think I should translate as therefore instead of because. The Chinese word is strange, right? 故, okay. You can interpret as because, and also you can translate as therefore, which is opposite in English, but in Chinese, ancient Chinese, 故 have been used both. Okay, so I think your understanding is exactly the same as my understanding, because the Shengren, the sage, this sage is not the Taoism sage. It could be the Confucianist sage,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Because and I would disagree. Guanzang translate as a leader. I translate as because the leader they will use different words like a Jun, okay, but Guanzang I will consider as a bureaucratic system, right? You build a government system. Okay, so you divide it and the division of labor and the work, and which is bad. Okay, according to Taoism. I'm not saying I say that is bad. I'm saying Taoism believe that's bad. So
yeah,
I think you are right. If I use therefore would be clear,
Well,
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think Darren has a good point in communicating the sentiment. The only thing I have to point at is then you're talking about using the last two lines as the verb. Therefore,
yes, but yeah,
don't divide the greater system.
yeah.
It's
that's what I'm
very
proposing.
important to bury the verb at the very end of a Chinese sentence. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it is an unusual place to sort of bury that action at the end.
Yeah.
But if you
Or it could be like, or therefore leave the, like something like therefore leave the greater whole or the system undivided. Maybe that will work too.
the trick is, Jason and I try to keep as close as we can to the original Chinese without adding as many unnecessaries, even that many parentheses, to make a explanation in our translation is unusual. But you're correct in that the last line here is very difficult to interpret without some sort of explainer. I do like your idea, though, of taking therefore don't divide the greater system. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or leave it undivided. Yeah.
These are yeah. I think that we should first is change the because to therefore, and secondly, the last sentence is imperative. Okay, it's a command. Okay, do this. Okay, so because the previous one was wrong, which is Confucianism. Confucianist is doing so, which is wrong. So okay, some work to work on. Thank you, Darren. That's a great help. And that's the purpose we want to have this meetup. So we will have a different view on the translation. Thank you, Darren, again. Kwang, please.
Yes, I would like to start my comment by the last four lines. Those last four lines remind a lot stanza 38, because in stanza 38 you will start with the highest awareness with the Tao, and when the Tao is lost, you go to Te, and when the Te is lost, you will go to service, kindness rather, and after to service and rituals, right? So the last four lines here in stanza 28 reminds stanza 38 because it is stated that as simplicity disintegrated, useful things were forged. Okay, so simplicity here is when your power is not lost, it will bring you back to start simplicity. If I take the translation by Professor Most Roberts. So Te will bring you back to simplicity, will bring you back to infancy, and will bring you back to before duality. So it is clear that Te will bring you back to Tao. That's in Tao Te Ching. So that simplicity, that things that is before duality or to infancy, is that precisely that infinite awareness, that primordial being, if you want, where you would be in your heaviness, to go back to stanza 26. And that is, and precisely when that simplicity disintegrated or when slipped down, useful things were forged, okay, in the sense that you will go down to kindness, to service, and to rituals. So those were the words that the wise men went by when serving as officers and elders. And it goes back a little bit to the discussion that you had with Darren. For fine cutters never harm the stone, in the sense that if that person were abiding in this thought simplicity, or to when he was before duality or in infancy, he would have that Te, or that even that Tao, that would make him capable of using the knife for 19 years and without making the blade losing its sharpness, or using things or interacting with people. Because I think that those stanza are very, very interrelated. For the first part, which is very long, from 1 to 18, once again, okay, it's the main subject of Tao Te Ching. I always talk about that, but it's the main subject. It's big. It is describing three situations of duality: male, female, white, black, and honors humility. But those three examples of duality are mind phenomena, and when those mind phenomena has to be brought back to start simplicity, to infancy, and to before the duality, that is precisely that idea of heaviness, of infinite awareness once again. So time and timelessness, I prefer to say timelessness and time, because it follows the I was going to say the hierarchy, but let's say the natural flow of Tao and Te. And I want to finish with the idea of morality. I think, and I think that we already have that kind of discussion before. I think that the Tao is promoting morality. I'm sorry, but not a morality that would be practiced as in Confucianism, but a morality that would comes from being spontaneously abiding in your own nature of infinite awareness. And if you're capable of doing that, morality in terms of behavior will flow spontaneously and not at a result of practice. Okay, it's always that dialectics. And the Tao Te Ching is always a go to the highest, to the Tao, to the infancy, to the before duality, to the start simplicity, and then everything you do will flow spontaneously. So my contention that there is a promotion of morality in the Tao Te Ching, but the promotion of morality in the Tao Te Ching is not by learning the principles and by practicing them, but rather to return to your original nature. And returning to your original nature, your behavior will be spontaneously moral, but it's not fake it till you make it, but rather be aware, and you wouldn't be spontaneously more doing moral. You would have spontaneously moral behavior. Okay, that's the Wu Wei. I think that one of the best English translation for Wu Wei precisely is spontaneity. And for fine cutters, never harm the stone, because fine cutters are people who are abiding in that start simplicity. And because they are abiding in that start simplicity, they cannot do harm. They will never harm the stone. And it reminds another metaphor in the Tao Te Ching that a good governance is like frying a small fish, like cooking a small fish, because cooking a small fish, you have to be very careful, you have to be very aware. So being very aware, being very careful, you are a fine cutter, to use the metaphor of this stanza, and never harm the stone because you are careful. And yes, let's say that with the small fish is a little bit more difficult than with a big fish, but it's debatable. I agree. I stop here.
All right, thank you, Kwang. Mark, please.
Juan, you are a big fish in the sea, but not one I would ever fry.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Now I'm just trying to remember what I was going to ask about. Oh yes, it was the word. I think you said it was ku, if I understood correctly, that you decided should mean therefore rather than because in this context.
Yeah, cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask about it in the previous chapter, in 27.
Mm-hmm.
Because it looks like I was able to identify the character occurs twice in 27.
Yeah. Cool.
And
I translate as therefore, right? So 27.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But the nature of this therefore, I think what sometimes throws me off is that I want to tend to read it in the sense of a logical inference.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a deductive system that's going on here. If anything, it's more of a comparison or an analogy. So because good closures do this, good ties do this, in this way, the sages are often good. So when you say therefore, I'm not going to understand it as a logical inference from what was said, but rather in this way. And I hope that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, can also be translated as hence.
Yeah.
That's another iteration of it. And it doesn't necessarily have the same logical inference gravity when you put it that way. But it is meant to be sort of a conclusionary indicator.
Yeah, I think that's a very complex situation, because I think most of the time they use as a hence or therefore, okay, but the use because sometimes there is a sort of like a because, but the reason of cause, I think, is very it's influenced by Buddhism. Because Buddhism have a lot of thinking about cause, what caused today's situation. That's why it become the sense of because, the causation become more and more, to the later time. So again, it's not perfect, but the logic is very different, and we sometimes don't know how much Aristotle contribute to our thinking, because the syllogism is very built in our mind. Okay, not only in Western world, also in modern Chinese people, the mind of syllogism. Okay, therefore, because therefore is very strong today. But I believe during the ancient Chinese, probably not that strong. So, Darren, please. We probably you have the last word.
Okay. Well, just regarding this character, I am consulting the Crow classical and medieval Chinese dictionary, and it is interesting, this word, in that it has like different. It can be understood different levels of abstraction. So it could be like therefore, but it could so one of the definitions here is just event or happening. It could just mean an event or happening. So that's even more, it's not even therefore, it's like one event and then another event and then another. So it's not saying one's connected to another. So that would be a even more abstract way of understanding. However, the top definition in the Crow Dictionary, it is reason, cause, or purpose. So it does have this sense. So it gives an example, 某gu. So in Mandarin, it's wu gu, I think, like for no good reason or without cause.
No good reason. Yeah.
Yeah. So it can have these different levels of abstraction. It can't actually mean reason or cause, but it could also mean therefore in maybe more abstract sense. And the most abstract would be just event. It's just like one event and then another event, not connecting them. So it like take your pick, right? It does have these multiple, even in the ancient Chinese, it already has these multiple senses. And I guess it depends on context how you interpret.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. And we should not blame on Chinese system, because if you read the Plato dialogue versus, you will find out that Socrates is very illogical in some way, because I always say, because Aristotle is Plato's student, is not Plato's teacher. If Aristotle is Plato's teacher, then Plato's dialogue will be more logical. So that's my understanding, but it's a very difficult situation. But anyway, that's call for today, and thank you, everyone. Then next week, we will go ahead to do chapter 29, 30, and 31. Then we probably will finish in three more sections. And again, thank you, everyone, and then I'll see you next week.
I'll get to my homework.